we got 2 chairs of every committee. There are sometimes lawyers, doctors, judges, mental health professionals, police officers, you name it, we've got a co-chair. We see problems, we kick them to the task force, and they get to work on it. It's education, it's training, it's putting legislation together, it's working on policy changes. It's been a really, really force of change in Ohio. And if you haven't seen the last summary of all the projects of the 15 committees, there's a stack over there that tells you is the one-year report of the different committee work. So if you're interested in joining one of the other committees, if you're not on the housing committee, join that. If you want to join another committee, you can go to that one. But take that booklet home with you and read about them. It's also online at the AG Task Force. And then I had a project called Stepping Up, which has counties working together on trying to coordinate the county resources with the state resources to deal with the problem of jail being the de facto hospital for people with mental illness. And that committee we have 63 counties now. We're the only one in the country that has that many counties. Most states have a couple here, a couple there, but we have 63. We're so proud of it. And there's another stack on the pile of materials that is all about stepping up, how you join. If your county's not on there, there's a map, so you can look on the map and see if your county's a Stepping Up county. And if it's not, I would love to work with you to try to get them to sign up. The county commissioners have to sign a resolution, and then we just sort of take over from there. And then that, again, Stepping Up is like the feeder into the AG Task Force when we need action on something. So it's just all has worked together just in an amazing way.
Thank you, Justice Stratton, and good morning to all of you here and out in virtual land. I'm grateful for your work, grateful that you're here. When I was a prosecuting attorney back in Delaware County, we'd have people come through courts and, give chances, second chance, third chance. Finally, it'd be like, okay, you just don't get it. Off to prison you go. And move on. Well, that one didn't work. As my public service developed, and I talked more and more, because I became very frustrated about the fact that happened so frequently in my legal practice as prosecuting attorney. And I began to realize that it's not that easy. That it's not just a matter of being compliant. I would love the access to wellness because it implies so many things. Whether we're talking about the acquisition of kinds of soft skills that allow you to show up for work on time, or to know how to deal with conflict with a superior at work, or dealing with depression or your trauma responses, and on through all sorts of things, including addiction, including practical things like home, having a roof over your head. And this task force has been unparalleled in its ability to break down silos, to create communication and collaboration across disciplinary lines. I'm grateful for all of you being here because the work that you're doing is as incremental as it sometimes may seem and as much out of the public spotlight as it certainly is, because we still know that people would rather not think about mental health and wellness and the barriers that people still have to live with. In spite of that not being in the spotlight, it is critical to our ability to survive and to move forward as a society. I'm grateful for your work. I'm grateful for the fact that you've spent your time and your energy and your intellectual might and imagination to weigh in here and lean forward. The other thing that I would say I would want to mention something first of all, because I don't know how many of you might interact with the criminal justice system. My office has created a grant program, $20 million a year for the next 3 years to put mental health services in jails. Most of your county jails do not have mental health or addiction services available consistently or sometimes at all. We're providing funds that will allow people to either some jurisdictions will be able to hire a full-time person to be there all the time. Other places will contract for services, of course, through existing providers because of scale issues. But I hope that you will put the word out that these resources are available. If your county is not a county that has yet applied for that money, please tell them, go to the Attorney General's office, free money, because it can make a difference. And finally, I want to say that I'm grateful for Eve Stratton. 25 years ago, she walked away from well, she's been involved for 25 years ago. 25 years, she hasn't been off the bench that long, but she eventually followed her heart and her passion into this area, left a coveted seat on the Ohio Supreme Court that she could have kept and continued to run for re-election until she was constitutionally unable to. And she instead chose to follow her heart and has put her entire being into this cause. I'm grateful to her. I'm grateful to you because you're not prosecutors. Prosecutor has the luxury of getting to a point where he said, I'm not going to care anymore. I'm going to ask the court to ship you, and then you're not my problem. When somebody relapses, when somebody loses their home, when people have issues and end up dropping through the safety net, through cracks, you have to bear their heartbreak. You have to somehow find the resilience and the strength within yourself to allow yourself to grieve, to protect your own heart, and still find strength to carry on. I want you to know that, in my view, that makes you some of the very best human beings I've ever had the occasion to meet. I'm grateful for you, and I just wanted you to hear that from your Attorney General. You matter. Your work here matters. It matters a lot to people that you may never see the good outcomes that occur. But you should know that they're there. They appreciate you, and I appreciate you, and I wish you a very successful conference today. Good luck.
Thank you again to the Attorney General for keeping this going. It has been just such a blessing to have so many people out there that are working together in so many different ways to make this, all these things happen. When you look at the list of the last 4-year report, this 1-year report, and all the things that this committee has accomplished, you can all be very, very proud of what you have done, the work you have achieved. And so this housing task force, housing was a near and dear issue from the day I started working on all this mental health issue. Every time I talked to different agency directors, everybody was fighting for the same house. Everybody wanted the same, needed to find something, not just affordable, but mostly supportive housing, which is a different version entirely, and not readily available in any form or fashion. So I've been involved in housing for probably the last 25 years. And I served on the National Corporation for Supportive Housing for 8 years. Did a lot of work nationally and with them, helped start was co-chair nationally of the frequent flyers program, frequent use of the system, where you try to track those that are cycling over and over and how much they're costing you over and over, and trying to break that cycle. And then we formed the Housing Committee of the Attorney General Task Force, had some great co-chairs, passed the Landlord Mitigation Fund, the Incentive Fund. I did a lot of things along those lines, and then I lost my co-chairs. They all moved on to other positions, and I was looking out for new co-chairs, and I had worked with Sean for, a long time when he was head of OHFA, so I had a great relationship already with him, and he had come out to work capacity with OHFA. And then Elaine Gimmel was another one suggested to me by Sally Lucan as somebody who could add the counterpart to the state picture with the local project she's worked on. So I asked both of them to be co-chairs over a year ago, almost 2 years now, I think. And they both assented, and the committee has just gone off running strong. Lots of amazing things that they talk about and work on in the housing committee. And so they just, with housing being so front and center everywhere, everybody's talking about the need for it. I thought it was very timely to have housing be the next Aging Task Force statewide committee meeting. We're excited that we have the capacity for people who can't meet it personally to attend as well. And my ever faithful Pete and Donna Miller, who take these things over and over, are taping this, and hopefully we'll have it on my website and see if we can get it on the Aging Task Force website so people who could be here can also get that. So I've got to now turn it over to my co-chairs. I'm going to let them give a little bit of their bio and background because I think it was better to hear it from them what they think might be significant for this group to know about. And they're going to run the whole meeting. I'm just going to sit back quietly and pop up if I need to, but hopefully not. And we will go till we have finished. And really appreciate, again, all of your attendance. And hopefully you'll get something out of this and we can make more progress in the time. So thank you to my co-chair.
Thank you all for being here today. My name is Evelyn Gimmel, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Housing Subcommittee. I'm also the Executive Director of EDEN Incorporated. It stands for Emerald Development Economic Network. EDEN is much easier to say. And it is a nonprofit housing development agency that's located in Cleveland. We own and manage a portfolio of properties, including permanent supported housing, as well as a scattered site portfolio that's funded through our Adams Board. And we administer rental assistance programs, including some that are specific to persons that are justice involved, such as Church of Ohio, the Community Transition Program, and CUYAHOGA, Returning Home CUYAHOGA, which you will hear about later today. I have been in EDEN for almost 30 years. I started obviously very young, but I loved housing. And before I was at EDEN, I was a behavioral health case manager. So I've kind of had the mental illness side of the house as well as housing. So I was very excited when Justice Stratton approached me about being a co-chair. EDEN actually has programs in Cuyahoga, Lake, Ashtabula, Medina, and Lorraine counties. So we have kind of expanded from Cuyahoga. Sean Thomas and I have been co-chairs only since January of last year, so it's only been a year. But we've really been trying to grow the membership of the committee to bring more expertise to the table on housing challenges, on resources available, as well as opportunities for partnership, because partnerships are really, really important to really get things done. Affordable housing is a national crisis, as we all know, and we have a crisis here in Ohio as well. It is even more difficult to get people who have justice involvement to get into housing and qualify. And I know we usually say decent and safe and affordable. I say access to high quality affordable housing. We don't want to settle for decent. We want high quality housing for our clients. Over the last year, our committee has held quarterly meetings, and some of the topics that have been presented have been the state-funded landlord incentive and mitigation fund programs. We've talked about local programs and plans for justice-involved persons. We've talked about state house updates, federal updates, discussion on things like the grants passed versus John's Supreme Court decision and how local communities were reacting to that. We talked about the Zero Returns to Homeless Initiative, the certification of housing process, OHFA's Housing Impact and Innovation Fund, as well as many of our organizations did advocacy when HUD had the proposed rule change to reduce criminal record-related barriers to HUD-assisted housing, but that wound up being withdrawn, unfortunately. But we all did try to advocate for it. Today, we are going to hear from a variety of agencies from the state level on down to local programs that exist for people with justice involvement. Before I turn it over to Sean, however, I just want to assert that it is more important now than ever to come together to advocate and take action for those with justice involvement, especially related to increasing affordable housing options. Always fearful that we are going to see a reduction in funding for housing programs that follow the philosophy of low barriers to housing. So we want to keep that at the forefront and do as much advocacy as we can because we want there to be low barriers to housing. That's how our clients get access to housing. This will harm those with justice involvement at an even higher level than those who are just experiencing homelessness, and we really can't afford to lose any housing opportunities for our clients. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean Thomas, who is the Senior Advisor for Policies and Programs at OHFA, and he's going to provide an update on the 2025 Housing Needs Assessment.
I've been with the agency for 30 years, so it's kind of hard to believe that. Mainly in multifamily area, so probably some of you don't know OHFA, referred to as OHFA, Ohio Housing Finance Agency. We're an independent state agency, which means we don't receive general revenue funds from the state. We are sustained by our bonds issued in our program fees and so forth. And we were created back in 1983 when the mortgage rates were in double digits back then. We're governed by 11-person boards. That board decides our policies and our program and so forth. And he approached our director who we started and asked us to participate. I think the only thing should be taken for an answer, but it's been a fun collaboration since then. So just last year, some of our results, and we hit the $1 billion mark in home buyer loan. These are first-time home buyers, so that's where the bonds come in. And we're not sure people getting the homes that when it started, homes were very scarce up there, but there were still getting a lot of reservations from first-time home buyers. That program is doing really well. They increased about 4,500 home buyers. That's probably what we do every year. And then on our multifamily side, which is where we work with Elaine and some of those support housing projects, we did about 5,000 units that were created or reserved last year. And then this is the time of year our research office puts together a needs assessment for the state. And we look at different data sources and so forth. There's also another national report that comes out at the same time, the National Loan Housing Coalition. It's called the GAP report. It's a really nice report. They kind of calculate the exact shorts units needs that serve people 30% of below income, which that's the income level for most people. This task force serves with people's mental illness and criminal justice involvement. So I'm going to give you, there's a bunch of charts and so forth. I won't bore you with all the details. If you have two takeaways, first takeaway is at 40. That's the number of available affordable units for 100 households at or below 30% AMI. So it's only 40 per 100 people. There's only 40 units available, and that number has been going down. And there's really no state in the country that has 100 out of 100. And second, the actual number of units is the shortage. It's around 264,000 units, which is just roughly the population of Toledo. So remember 40 Toledo, that's sort of the takeaways. And then our assessment, we've got other factors like homeownership and so forth. So if you look at the homeowners and renters, there's 1.2 million Ohioans that are severely cost burdened, which means they pay more than 50% of their income on housing costs, which is a really critical factor. The goal is to have like 30% of your income on housing, so this is way above that. Another factor is homelessness, and HUD does an annual point-in-time count of homelessness in every January. And this year, throughout the state, there's 12,000 individuals that are counted as homeless, and that's even, that's sort of an undercount even, so it's 12,000, so it's even undercounts, and that's like the highest spend in a decade in Ohio, so that's been one across the country. Homelessness is skyrocketing, so that's a big problem. So if you want to look at all the data in depth, look at all the tables and stuff that our team put together. Our website is ohiohomes.org, or you can go to nationalhomecompany.org /gap. That's the gap reports there, and like interactive map. You can click on Ohio the data. And then Elaine mentioned our committee meetings. We're always looking for new members that are interested in participating. We do almost virtual, so no room limits. So we're always welcome new members who want to join. Just send Elaine or I an email. We'll show the list. We have 3 more meetings this year, so but it's not all doom and gloom. We have some nice initiatives we're going to go through today. So we're going to start up. There's how much it's going to talk about. I guess a statewide update. She's with Enterprise Community Partners.
I'm Hazel Remish. I'm the Director of State and Local Policy for Enterprise Community Partners. We do have a local office out of Cleveland that actually, on the ground, we syndicate tax credits, we invest in housing at the local level, and do bipartisan policy work. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Home Matters to Ohio, since we are part of this coalition and have been for a very long time. But first, I'll share a little bit about myself. I'm an attorney by trade. I spent 15 years working at the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland, doing landlord-tenant work, and led some advocacy work around right to counsel, providing legal representation for tenants who are facing eviction or have interaction with the eviction system. So long history in the housing field and just in the general legal context. So I'll jump in and talk a little bit about Home Matters to Ohio. This is a coalition. As you'll see, these are some of the founding members of this coalition. They range from affordable housing advocates to business and industry leaders, really focused on housing policy across the state. So this ranges from, providers that are focused on homelessness to Habitat for Humanity, who's focused on building homes, and the spectrum of investments and so forth, and the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. So as you can see here, these are just some of the partners. These groups have been informally meeting for over 6 years, and we have been together for a variety of different budget cycles. So this is a budget year, and so the state has a 2-year budget cycle. And so we informally have been meeting for between 6 and 10 years, really focused around just sort of sharing what's going on in the budget, where there are opportunities to collaborate and support each other, but always with a focus on housing. And so this, at the end of last year, we decided that we were going to come together and put forth a platform that we could present to the state. These are priorities that we thought we could all come together, that were vetted, that were driven based on data, and that we could all support and come together, even though we were from different industry and different, sort of parts of the state. So our hope was that the mission of this platform was that it was realistic, that there were things that could be implemented. We released it right at the end of last year during lame duck, in anticipation that we were going to be dealing with a budget cycle this year, and then really focus on safe, decent, and affordable housing across the state. And I'll mention that affordable isn't affordable in the context of, just low-income housing. We know that there's a shortage of, over, as Sean just mentioned, over 260,000 units that are needed across the state. So it isn't, low-income housing when we're talking affordable. We're talking about, homes that folks, with medium income can afford across the state. So I already talked a little bit about this. I'm going to skip some of these slides. I assume this will be shared with you all, but because I want to get into sort of what are the policy priorities. So what the platform does, there are 11 policy proposals included in this platform, and you'll see at the end there's going to be a website that you all can visit, and if you are so inclined, can support the platform. But there's 4 overarching proposals in there, and I'll go through all of them. But the idea is to support communities, right, to make sure that we can meet the demand for housing across the state, that there's incentives for folks who are building, so developers, that there's incentives across the state for the development of new housing. And even though the platform itself doesn't provide all the answers, we're hoping that it provides both the governor and the General Assembly just a foundation for them to, as they're thinking about like what are some of these things that are going to be in the budget, that they can move forward as they're thinking about those incentives. So policy goal number 1 is that the state should improve that the state of Ohio should improve the some of the recently enacted programs. And we're going to talk a little bit about what those programs are. So Ohio LIHTC, so the Ohio Low Income Housing Tax Credit, came out of the 2023 budget. It is new to the state, obviously. It mirrors like the federal LIHTC, so the Federal Low Income Housing Tax Credit, which is one of the biggest tools that we have across the state to build new housing. And so our goal through this platform is to expand that. My understanding is that program is set to sunset at the end of 2027. So we're hoping that it'll become a sustainable source of income, or a sustainable line in the budget, so that it doesn't sunset at the end of 27, but rather it extends to 2031, and that it goes from 100 million annually to 500 million annually in the budget. So that's part of the advocacy that we're doing right now. There are a couple of projects that are in the works through this program, and it is one of the most useful tools that we have to develop new housing, specifically around workforce development in particular. The second program that came out of the 2023 budget was the Welcome Home Ohio program. This program focuses on residential property development, and traditionally it was meant to foster innovative ways to build housing. So thinking about like modular housing and ways that land banks come in and can build housing in like infill and things like that, like empty lots. So our hope was that this could be layered with other programs, but the way that the program has been designed doesn't really lend itself to that. So we have some suggested tweaks to the program as part of our policy platform. And there does seem to be industry consensus on what those changes should be. There's an amendment that's been introduced, hopefully as part of the budget. And so we're hoping that those changes are made so that that program can be utilized a little bit more broadly. But we're excited about the program as a whole. We think it's a useful tool. It's just a couple of tweaks that need to be made to it. And then again, another program that's already came out of I believe this one came out of the 2023 budget as well, the Single Family Housing Tax Credit Program. So a very useful tool to develop housing, but there are some technical updates that are needed in order to make it workable for developers. And so again, we know these programs came into existence, we need some changes to them, and so the platform advocates for those changes. Many of these changes are being led, so on the Welcome Home Ohio program, they're being led by the Ohio Land Bank Association. The Single Family Housing Tax Credit Program, those changes are being led by the Ohio CDC Association. And so we have really experts at the table who are leading some of those amendments through the budget process. But there definitely is a consensus through the industry as to the changes that should be made. The other one I'll talk about is the Ohio Housing Trust Fund. So this is a program that really is critical, especially for our most vulnerable populations. You're thinking of domestic violence victims, homelessness, really the most vulnerable populations that you can think of are funded through the Housing Trust Fund. And last year, there was a bill, Senate Bill 94, that increased. So the way that the trust fund works, it's the recorder fees are distributed among the municipalities, and then they go, and that's how the trust fund is funded. And it's a complicated structure, but at the end of the day, that's how we fund many of those programs that a lot of people don't understand that's where the funding is coming from. They think, my funding came from the Office of Community Development, or they came from, the county, but they don't realize that the funding is actually coming from the trust fund from the state. And so because of the changes, like there's been changes to, people have switched to digital recording, for example, or, there's just been changes that have decreased the amount of money that has been coming into the trust fund. This year, we're actually looking for the funding for an expansion of that to come out of the General Revenue Fund, which is the first year that's been requested. And we're hoping that'll steady the trust fund for years to come, since it's such an important resource for those vulnerable populations. And then I'm going to talk about these two new programs that I'll be honest, that we're hoping to tie this to economic development, and we know that these programs this is an expensive concept, so this is more of a aspirational, but recognizing that at some point we need to, as a state, connect economic development with housing. And so these two next policy proposals that I'm going to talk about are really sort of like, aspirational goals, but we wanted to include them because they exist in other parts of the country and are working very well. So the first one is an infrastructure program, so thinking about housing-related infrastructure, so utilities, transit, water lines, like those things that, sort of creating a program that addresses those throughout the state. So we know that this is expensive, but it's something that probably will need to happen at some point across the state. And then, again, thinking about workforce development and connecting that to home improvement and home repairs. So in particular, I'm from, I live in Cuyahoga County. The housing stock in Cleveland in particular is very, very old. We know that 90% of our housing stock was, built before 1978. So those, and that's probably the case across the state, right? Like, so we know that our housing stock is aging, that it needs repairs. And so thinking about home improvement and repairs and connecting that to workforce in order to marry those two things, we know that that's something that will likely need to happen at some point in the state, at the state level. And so combining that with workforce development so that there's construction jobs and training to go with it. Again, a very expensive, a big lift, but wanted to put it out there so that the General Assembly begins to consider it and think about it, even if it's something that doesn't get done in this particular General Assembly. I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions before I move on to the next section. Okay. The next one is really thinking about zoning regulations and reform. So last year, there was a bill that was introduced that would allow for municipalities to apply for grants to the state that would give them funding if they wanted to look at their zoning regulations in order to allow for like more density or to have like more flexibility in their zoning rules. That bill did not get traction and did not go anywhere, but we do think it's an important piece of the puzzle when we're thinking about how to build and how to have more flexibility in construction and make sure that you have more ability to build more housing. And so that's something that we are supportive of and that the platform calls on, is that not necessarily that the state itself have the zoning regulation, but that it does provide funding and resources and technical assistance so that those municipalities who want to do it are able to do it and have the resources to do it. Specifically, when you're thinking about, sort of some creative housing solutions like modular housing or zoning, or ADUs or things like that. And the other sort of policy goal I wanted that we've included in here is really thinking about just housing as a whole, adapting housing as a foundation or a policy, a foundation for family stability, workforce development, and that really is part of the way that people get generational wealth, is to have that steady housing. And so we know across the state that, depending on where you all are at, that property taxes are a big issue throughout the state. Last year, there was a special committee that was set out to actually have hearings around property tax reform. And so there was a report that was released, and there have been multiple bills, so many that it is hard to keep track of, around property tax reform. We are supportive of property tax including some sort of regulation. We know that one bill is not going to fix it all. So a menu of services is the way we're looking at it, to make sure that vulnerable homeowners, folks who have lived in their units for a long time and are getting maxed, kind of priced out of their neighborhoods, and making sure that those neighborhoods are stable, because you want those longstanding citizens to be able to continue to stay there. Another issue, and this is something that we see in Cleveland quite a bit, real estate investors coming in and buying entire blocks. There was a bill introduced last year that required real estate investors who were coming in and doing that to file some sort of disclosure when they were doing that. It did get a couple of hearings, but there was a tax liability that was attached to it, so it didn't go very far. We do think that the disclosure pieces of that bill were really critical. A lot of times you'll see that, you'll have a real estate investor come in, they buy a property, tenants who are living in there don't know who bought it, who to pay the rent to. They don't know, if there's a repair that needs to be done, who they should be requesting that repair from. So this, the transparency and accountability from the owner is really important. And Cleveland recently just passed a local ordinance that requires that there be a local agent in charge if you're going to have a real estate, owner. So thinking about creative ways to make sure that that disclosure happens at the state level. And then this one is really focusing on renters. So, we know that once a renter, we know that our folks who are facing eviction really have a harder time renting in the future because they have that Scarlet E. So ensuring that renters who are facing eviction have an attorney. The legal system, is not meant to be navigated alone. Even in eviction court, a lot of times folks think that, it's eviction court, it's meant to be a speedy process and you don't really need a lawyer. But actually there are defenses that that renters can raise. A lot of times, even if the eviction is for non-payment of rent, there are negotiations that can happen. And there's a lot that can be done to make sure that, a family doesn't face the trauma of having their stuff put out on the tree lawn. And so making sure that renters have an attorney representing them and that they have access to records daily, right? So in the criminal context, we know that exists, but in the civil context, in eviction cases, there is no state law that gives access to eviction sealing, and so that eviction will follow somebody for the rest of their life, even if they never ever get evicted again, or even in fact actually the filing itself will follow them for the rest of their life, even if they won that case. Even if they were actually not evicted, the filing will still show up on their record. And so eviction record sealing is something that we're pushing forward in this policy platform. I will say that it has been part of this last 6 General Assemblies and has not gotten traction, but there is a bill that's been introduced this year by Senator Michelle Reynolds that I think has some really, I think this year might be it. We'll see, fingers crossed. And then this is just a catch-all, really thinking about encouraging, different ways of, and being more diverse and creative about the way that we're thinking about our housing overall. There's a lot of really cool things happening across the country, from taking schools and converting them into housing, from office building conversions. There's modular housing, there's off-site construction. There's all of these different things that are happening across the country. And so just really encouraging the state to think about different ways of doing housing, because we don't have the supply for it. And the way that we've been doing it isn't going to generate enough given the gap that we have. So this is just a catch-all, but really just an encouraging way of letting the state know, we really need to think about housing differently, especially if we want to focus, we know that it's the foundation for everything else. We know that, you need a place to sleep, in order to be successful in all the other things. So sort of this last policy goal is really focused on, thinking more creatively about the way that we've thought about housing. And I'm gonna stop here. There's a website. If you all want to read the full platform, you're welcome to. We're taking sign-ons still. We're still having conversations with the legislature. The budget cycle will end June 30th, so we are still having those conversations right now. We have amendments before the legislature on many of these issues. So please feel free to reach out if you have questions, if you want to learn about any one of these particular topics, if you want to learn more, Sean can share my information, but, you know, and if anybody has any questions right now, I'm happy to answer them. Thanks, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Guiting Betts. I am a member of the Ohio Mass Housing team. Thank you for the invitation. So I have this opportunity here to share the landlord incentive program and landlord mitigation program information with you. Before I go into the detail of the program, I want to provide a couple of the keywords to help distinguish the difference between the two programs. Landlord incentive program is to recruit landlords, and landlord mitigation program is to retain landlords. And the information I'm sharing today is for state fiscal year 2025. And due to the limited time, I will go through the presentation slides first, and I will take questions at the end if there's any. And I will start with the landlord incentive program. So for state fiscal year 2024 and state fiscal year 2025, we have 1 million state general revenue funds each year. There are 37 Adam sports participating in the landlord incentive program. Some of the participating boards manage the landlord incentive program by themselves, and some participating boards have their contract provider to work manage the landlord incentive program. So these participating boards can utilize the landlord incentive funding to recruit and incentivize eligible landlords that rent to individuals with a criminal records who have a mental illness, and or substance use disorder, or are being discharged from a psychiatric hospital. Landlord incentive program does not provide rental subsidy. It merely provides incentive payments to eligible landlords to help the program's target population to obtain and retain permanent housings in Ohio communities. I'm sorry, apparently I didn't change the slides earlier. Here's the information I was just talking about earlier. So thank you, sorry about that. The purpose of the landlord incentive program is to increase the number of landlords willing to rent to the program's target population and secure permanent housing for the program's target population. Target population. Eligible landlords need to rent to the program's target population in order to qualify for the landlord incentive funding. So for landlord incentive, individuals must have a criminal record, and individuals must also have mental illness and or substance use disorder, or are being discharged from a psychiatric hospital. If an individual only have a criminal record but does not have mental illness or substance use disorder, then this individual does not meet the program's target population. Vice versa. The definition of the criminal records: individuals who have current or past felony or misdemeanor cases open in common pleas or municipal county courts. It doesn't matter if the individual was charged years ago or recently. It all meet the definition of criminal record for the program. And the charge can also happen in a different state as long as it can be verified. Eligible landlords for the landlord incentive programs are private landlords who follow housing quality standards and provide standard tenant landlord lease and provide permanent housing settings to the program's target populations in Ohio communities. This includes any newly recruited private landlords. This also includes any private landlords that have been renting to the program's target population. However, this excludes any properties that are owned by the boards or their contract CBHC or housing agencies. This also excludes any Class 1 residential facilities, Class 2 residential facilities, recovery housing residents, and permanent supportive housing providers. Landlord incentive payment. So eligible landlords can receive up to $2,000 for the same unique tenant's target population. It can be either a new placement or lease renewal. So if a private landlord has multiple rental units and can rent to the program's target population, this private landlord can be eligible for the landlord incentive funding multiple times because the calculation is based on per placement. Or in a situation, if a private landlord is willing to renew a minimum 1 year, 12-month of lease with an eligible target population, target tenant, then these private landlords can also eligible for the landlord incentive funding. It's one time only and up to $2,000. Again, eligible landlords can receive up to $2,000 for the same unique tenant target population, and it can be either a new placement or lease renewal. Allowable expenses for the landlord incentive program. It can be a vacancy payment incentive to hold a rental unit until the tenant is available to move in up to 60 days. It can be an additional security deposit for landlords to keep. It's not refundable, non-returnable. It's like a bonus for the landlords.
Hi, Mike, this is Sam from OHFA. You should have filed for an extension, I think it is.
Just tell them.
Whoever is talking, you might want to mute yourself because you are broadcasting to everybody right now. So, okay. So additional security deposit is actually the most common use of the landlord incentive funding. The landlord incentive funding can also be used as a small repairs in rental units to conform with housing quality standards at time of lease signing. It can also be used as a housing quality standards inspections as needed for placement. It can also be used as a rent reporting services to improve tenants' credit scores, or it can be used as additional insurance coverage for landlords. What you see here is the full list of the allowable expenses for the landlord incentive program. Participating boards can either offer this full list to eligible landlords in their counties, or they can choose partial of the list from this menu to offer to eligible landlords in their counties. Ineligible uses of landlord incentive funding includes, but are not limited to the following. It cannot be used as a rental subsidy. It cannot be used, to repair rental units after tenant move-in, or it cannot be used to cover any charges that are tenants' responsibilities, like security deposit, the original security deposit, application fee, or any charges at time of lease signing. We had a late start for the landlord incentive program. So the program actually didn't start until the state fiscal year 2024 fourth quarter. So with the 3 quarters data, so it's including state fiscal year 2024 fourth quarter, state fiscal year 2025 first quarter and second quarter, 75 private landlords were recruited and 86 placements, which includes 81 new placements and 5 of them were lease renewal. We were informed these 5 lease renewal were basically could lose their housing if there were no landlord incentive funding to provide to these landlords. And here are the contact information for all 37 participating boards. Again, some participating boards manage the landlord incentive funding by themselves, and some participating boards works with their contract providers to manage the landlord incentive funding. Do we have any questions for the landlord incentive program so far before I move to landlord mitigation program?
Will the funding be renewed for that program, do you think?
We did put in the budget request, but we do not know if it will get approved or not at this point. Any additional questions? Okay. Landlord mitigation program. Again, the information I'm sharing is for the state fiscal year 2025. The purpose of the landlord mitigation program is to retain existing landlords and operates like an insurance program for eligible landlords who rent to individuals and families with long histories of criminal justice involvement, have poor rental histories, and have mental illness and or co-occurring substance abuse histories. The target population for the landlord mitigation program is very similar to the landlord incentive program, but it's a little different. So eligible landlords also need to rent to the program's target population in order to qualify for the landlord mitigation program. So for landlord mitigation, individuals must have criminal records, and individuals must also have mental illness and or co-occurring substance abuse history. So for landlord mitigation program, it is a must-have to have a criminal record and mental illness. The definition of criminal record is the same for the both programs. So individuals who have current or past felony or misdemeanor cases open in common pleas or municipal county courts. Again, it doesn't matter if the charge was years ago or recently, it all meet the definition of criminal record for the program. Eligible landlords for the landlord mitigation programs are private landlords and Class 2 residential facilities, also known as adult care facilities, who rent to the program's target population. Landlords need to follow housing quality standards and provide standard landlord-tenant lease or residence agreements. If it's a Class 2 residential facility, it needs to be licensed by Ohio MAS, and the license needs to be in good standing. This excludes any properties that are owned by the boards or their contract CBHC or housing agencies. This also excludes any Class 1 residential facilities, Class 3 residential facilities, and recovery housing residents. There are only 2 allowable expenses for the landlord mitigation program. It can be a reimbursement for rental unit damages that were caused by the tenant's target population during tenancy or a move out that are above normal wear and tear and exceed deposit. Landlords can actually submit rental unit damages claims while tenants still residing in the rental unit. If the tenant can continue to reside in the rental units, that's the best scenario. If not, it is okay as well. So landlords do not need to wait until tenants move out to submit the landlord mitigation claim for rental unit damages. It can also be used as a reimbursement of unpaid rent only if in a situation that the tenant target population abandons the rental unit before the lease ends. In this situation, we can pay up to 2 months of rent. However, if the individual, the tenant is still residing in the rental unit but decided not to pay rent, then landlord mitigation funds cannot be used to cover the unpaid rent in this situation. The maximum amount per claim is $5,000. Ineligible uses of landlord mitigation fund. Again, it cannot be used to pay for any properties that are owned by the boards or their contract CBHC or housing agencies. Cannot be paid for any Class 1 residential facility, Class 3 residential facilities, and recovery housing agency, recovery housing residents. It cannot be used as a rental subsidy. It cannot be used as a pre-lease or tenant move-in, move-out financial incentive for landlords. It cannot be used as financial assistance to pay off tenants' debts or any charges that are tenants' responsibilities. It cannot be used for supportive services to buy furniture, household items, or repair housing unit to meet housing quality standards before tenants move in. It cannot be used as reimbursement of unpaid rent only if it's an abandonment of lease. And it cannot be used as incentive to recruit landlords. So for landlord mitigation program, it is a claim process. Currently, we have 14 Stepping Up county participating in the landlord mitigation programs. And the claims are processed on a first-come, first-served basis and on a reimbursement basis until funding runs out or until June 30th, 2025, whichever comes earlier. This is probably too small, the font is probably too small to read, but here is the flow chart for the landlord mitigation claim. So first step, landlords need to contact local Stepping Up county representatives. Especially for rental unit damages claim, landlords need to contact the local Stepping Up county representative before repairing rental units. Step 2, local Stepping Up county representative will need to do the on-site visit. They will need to take photos, verify rental unit damages, and provide instructions to submit a landlord mitigation claim. Step 3, landlords need to submit completed document, the claim application, and with the supporting documents to the Stepping Up county representative. Step 4, the local Stepping Up county representative will need to forward the claim request to Ohio MAS for approval. And final step, the approved claim will be sent over to OHFA for payment, and OHFA issues payments directly to landlords. As of March 17, 2025, we have received 17 and processed 17 claims, and the average amount is $34.69, and the amount ranged between $915 and $5,000. And after that, we did receive a few more claim requests, so there are still a few waiting to be processed. And here are the contact information for the 14 stepping up counties that are participating in the landlord mitigation program. And this is all the information I have for the landlord mitigation program. Does anybody have any questions?
I just have a comment. These funds have been amazing for us in Cuyahoga, and I know we're doing some in Lorraine as well, but it's really, I think, spurred some other programs to come out of it. And I appreciate OMA stepping up to have a statewide program, but you know, affordable units, they're very competitive in trying to recruit landlords and then retain them. These programs have been very, very helpful in doing so. So I just want to say thank you. And then I do have one question is,
Sure.
What was the motivation behind adding the class 2s? Because they weren't, I think, part of the original group.
They were actually
Okay.
in the original pilot phase as well. It just were not as advertised.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
If the tenant's responsible for the utilities and they abandon, like the water sewer, can a landlord put an application in for those?
We actually received that questions from you, so we do have additional questions back to you to find out more information, whether the individual, this, on the lease agreement is whose responsibility, what is it written in the lease agreement, then we will be able to answer that question.
Okay.
Okay? So any.
And hi all, this is Roma. I think again, one thing that we're looking at is we're not in, it's damages to a unit as opposed to it only covering up to 2 months of missed rent. So we are going to look at that and we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Roma.
Sure.
Will there ever be an opportunity for more counties to apply to be part of the landlord mitigation fund coming up?
Well, currently, because the funding is going to end basically the end of June, and we don't know what it's gonna look like for the new budget. So that we really don't know at this point. If budget get approved, then of course we're gonna open it up. But at this point, we don't know for sure. Any additional questions? Thank you very much.
Good morning. Again, my name is Linnea McDonald. I work for the Office of Reentry for Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. I will not be before you long. So I am kind of over housing for the Office of Reentry side of Department of Corrections. About almost 2 years ago, our director found that we had a need to focus on housing. We have Bureau of Community Services who they cover like the halfway houses, our transitional housing and things like that. And what we were finding is that individuals that may not be going to a halfway house or may not be on supervision, we were having issues housing those individuals. And so some of my duties kind of shifted to primarily focus on housing. We did a lot of research on mitigation funds and that type of thing. Currently, we are doing a pilot for master leasing. We're hoping that we will get funding to expand that after or into the new fiscal year. So, certificate of qualification for housing. And the interesting thing about this is that some of the things I'm going to talk about, we were actually doing before this legislation went into effect. So when I got appointed to look at housing, we had an executive leadership project that was going on, focusing on housing. What could we do to help people who were just as involved get sustainable housing that would help them be successful? Because I've been in reentry for a very long time, and I can remember when I first started in reentry at the county, because I'm from Toledo, so in Lucas County, we were always focused on jobs, getting somebody a job, getting somebody a job. If we got them a job, they would be successful. everything has shifted because we can get people jobs, very good jobs. We have people coming out making $20 and $30 an hour from our institutions because we have so many programs and educational opportunities. And so now in the current climate, it's not about getting a job, it's about getting someone housing. Because they can have a job, but if they don't have a place to lay their head, they cannot be successful. It's just the reality of what we're going through. And it's unfortunate because we're going through a housing crisis already. And so then people who are then just as involved have even harder time getting and sustaining housing. So House Bill 50, when it was signed in June of last year, went into effect in September. And basically, it creates relief for people who are just as involved. Anybody familiar with the CQE process, Certificate of Qualification for Employment? All right. So it's very similar to that. It has some differences, which I will talk about. So if you know about that, you kind of, some of this will sound familiar to you. Basically, it lists barriers for individuals who are just as involved. And our hope is that housing providers will take an independent look at a person who's just as involved and give them a chance for fair, sustainable housing. Very similar to CQEs, where we hope that employers and licensing boards will look at the individual and not their crime and give them a fair chance at employment. This does not create any additional relief for sex offenders, arsonists, or violent offenders. So if they have reporting requirements, those reporting requirements are still in place. And this bill basically limits liability to housing providers if they rent to someone who may be just as involved. All right, there's two paths to how someone can obtain a certificate of qualification for housing. The certificate of achievement and employability. So this is something that someone is working on while they're incarcerated. And they can get this in a couple different ways. They can be incarcerated and complete all the steps, which is basically a vocational program, community service, and achievement and rehabilitation. So basically, just give you a little more information. A vocational program may be like our CDL program or advanced job training or something like that. So something in that realm, there's like 5 different things that they could do to achieve that. And then community service, 120 hours of community service. And unfortunately, all of our institutions don't have the opportunity to do community service. So the second part of what I'm going to talk about will assist. And then finally, the achievement and rehabilitation, that's like a career tech, someone getting their GED, someone getting their high school diploma, something like that. So those 3 things are under the Certificate of Achievement and Employability. So the other caveat to that is they also, per the statute, have to have a tenant readiness program. We have, well, let's say, over the last year and a half, we have been negotiating, because I actually thought I was going to have to write a tenant readiness program. However, I didn't have to because we contracted with Ready to Rent. It is a nationally recognized tenant readiness program out of Oregon. We did our first training for staff members in our institution in November, and they are running the program currently. I've been to 1 graduation and sat in on 2 other classes. I can tell you our population is really loving it because it does all the basics of teaching people how to be a good tenant, looking at their credit, when to report things. I mean, you know, things that I think most of us take for granted, but that is the program that we use. Again, it's called Ready to Rent. We are actually going to be doing some community trainings for facilitators. So I will ensure that Sean gets that information to share if any of you or your organizations want to become facilitators for Ready to Rent. It is an awesome program, and it also has a portion for housing providers too. I think it's wonderful. I'm so glad we found it, so I didn't have to write anything. So say someone did not get everything they needed as far to achieve the CAE. If they are on supervision and they get out and they go to a halfway house or they partner with one of our community resources like a coalition, they can finish this process. So say they didn't get Ready to Rent because they got earned credit and they got out early and they didn't get to finish it. they can go to one of our community providers or one of the coordinators that work in the Office of Reentry. If they're running a class, they can get in that class to complete the criteria for getting a CAE. Another thing I can tell you is that our halfway houses are ecstatic about this because they're like, we want to help. Because if someone is on supervision, they go to a halfway house, they can finish not only their programming, but their community service hours in order to get that CAE. And once you get the CAE, we automatically give you the certificate of qualification for housing, and there is no waiting period. So that is the best part about doing it while you're incarcerated or on supervision. The second path to getting a CQH is directly through the Court of Common Pleas of the court that the person is residing in. And basically, we have to provide the petition to the courts, and then that person files directly with the court. Very similar to the CQE, there is a $50 filing fee, and the court makes that decision and provides that certificate of qualification for housing. I will tell you that this kind of all went into effect very quickly, and so we had to then create a petition. The petition is currently with legal. Fingers crossed, it will go out to all the county courts next week by the 1st, and people will be able to file directly with the courts. Why a CQH, right? So I can tell you when we did the Executive Leadership Project, we had the Apartment Association presidents and other housing providers, lots of different housing providers in different facets of what they do. And one of the things they kept saying is they wanted to make sure that people knew how to be a good tenant. So with a CQH, we're kind of encompassing all of that. We're teaching people the skills they need to be successful when they get out. We're also providing a tenant readiness program, and we're letting housing providers know we heard you, and so we are doing these things to ensure that people can be good tenants. And I always tell people, my worst tenant was a family member. So, people think that just because people have been just as involved, they're awful tenants. They're actually some of the best tenants you can have because they appreciate the housing. Why a CQH? Because even if they don't get it through the Department of Corrections, the court is going to do a thorough investigation. They're going to make sure that there's no outstanding charges, no outstanding fines, things that may hinder them from paying rent and those type things. So it's a very, 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 very important legislation. And again, at the end, it's about allowing someone to move forward and be successful in their lives, right? People cannot continue to be judged by the worst mistake they made in their life. And so we're hoping that the CQH process is going to help people find safe, sustainable, affordable housing. I will tell you some of the things that we're doing internally, because we cannot have, we have the legislation, now we have this process, but we have to get out and talk to the housing providers. We have to be in the community. We have to do those things so people understand, just like a CQE, what a CQH is and why they should accept it and what things we're doing and why this person should be given a chance. So we're doing like lots of lunch and learns. In January, we did a virtual forum where we had Fair Housing, myself, Raina, who was over Ready to Rent, and we had like 400 and something people on that virtual platform where we were talking about these things. Fair housing, we were talking about the education piece, we were talking about CQHs. And so myself, Raina, some other housing providers, as well as some fair housing staff are setting up additional lunch and learns. We're going out and talking to apartment associations and anyone who will listen, really, to talk about this piece and why it's important to give people a fair chance at housing. Revocation. So it can only be revocated if someone is convicted of another crime. If they have pending charges, it will not be revoked. It will only be revoked if they are actually convicted. And I think that is important because people always ask, well, what if somebody gets a drunk driving charge? Well, if they get a charge, it's just a charge. If they get convicted, it can be revocated. And currently that part, we're still working on what that looks like with the courts, because the reality is that DRC can't manage all of this. But if someone gets one through the court, they're going to also report it to us. And so we're going to try to eventually get electronic means of being able to do this automatically. We push a button, and if it's revocated, it's revocated. I did add a summary of the CQH on this slide, and I will submit an electronic copy to Sean, as well as the CAE facts and application so that everybody can have it. And here's my information if you need it, and it will be on the slide. And if you all want to contact me directly, or you want us to come out and talk about this or anything like that.
Yeah, are you guys collecting the data on how many of these applications are issued?
Which ones, the CQH or the CQ?
Both of them, actually.
We
I'm
are.
on the Sensing Commission, and we do a bunch of reports that this stuff is in.
So this is all new for us, but yes, that is the goal, to collect the data so that we can report out on not only the CQHs, but even the CAE process. So that process is increasing within our prisons because people want to be able to get the CQH before they get out.
Great.
Absolutely. Any other questions, comments? All righty. Like I said, I will provide the additional documents to you, Sean, then you can provide it to anyone, and if anyone needs us or wants more information as we move through this process, please just let me know.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
If they do revoke the housing, what does that look like? Do you have to have the police come by and take them out, or, I mean, the court can order it, but how's the revocation actually?
So that will be up to each individual county. Any other questions? All right, thank you for your time.
So Access to Wellness, just to give you a brief overview, what the program does is it builds individualized community wraparound services for adults with severe and persistent mental illness who are also involved in multiple different systems. So for this program in particular, there are 5 different systems that we have identified where the majority of our SPMI folks filter through. So we'll get to that in the eligibility piece. But what the counties have done is they've really developed unique, nuanced systems to support the folks within their community that meet these criteria. So that is correct. Governor DeWine did introduce this initiative in his state fiscal year 22 budget. At the time, the project received $11 million, so 5.5 per year in the biennium. We did get a $1 million increase for this current biennium, so we now have $6 million per year in the current biennium. Just to answer the question, it is also in our budget, and we are waiting to hear whether or not we will be approved for it in June. And we've also requested the same $12 million. We've noticed that that is a sweet spot for this program to meet the needs. For those of you who are not new to this program, it used to be called the Multi-System Adult Program, but our leadership felt that that was a little too stigmatizing, and I agree with them. So now we call it the Access to Wellness Program. Not to be confused with our Access to Success program, which is for folks coming out of our regional psychiatric hospitals. Currently, we have 47 of the 50 county ADAM-HS boards participating. Putnam, Brown, and Butler are currently not participating in this program, but the rest of them are. And the way this money is it's GRF funds filtered down through an allocation to the boards. The boards do not have to apply. It's not a grant. If the boards say they want to participate, then I get them onboarded and we move forward. Each board has a different amount of money that's allocated to them based on the individuals that they serve within their community. So for instance, your metropolitan counties are going to receive close in the millions of dollars, where a smaller county board like Lake County or Preble is going to receive a smaller amount, just based on the population that they think they're going to serve with this funding. So there are 5 eligibility, 5 it seems to be like a sweet spot with this program now that I realize it, but there are 5 eligibility criteria. An individual must meet one of these eligibility criteria to participate in this program. And so there's a lot of information here. You'll have this anyway, but let's go through this. So the first criteria is the one that's been with the program the longest. It is 2 inpatient psychiatric hospitalizations within the past 12 months. What that means is that March 26, 2025, going back to March 26, 2024. If they have 2 or more inpatient psychiatric hospitalizations, we can check that box. And it can be private or regional psychiatric facility. It can even be out of state. So if we have somebody that has come here and maybe they were hospitalized in Michigan or an adjoining state, we can count that towards this as well. And then here's those 5 systems I mentioned earlier. We have aging over 65, criminal justice involvement, so they could be in an AOT program, they could be on probation, they could be involved in a specialty docket. Developmental disabilities, the individual must be linked to their county board of DD and involved in services. I'm going to skip over homelessness and come back to that one for a second. Veterans. And then homelessness is a spectrum for this program. With the understanding, I don't need to preach to the choir here, but you all understand that our folks cycle in and out of housing quite frequently. So this spectrum includes, hey, I have lived on the street for several years and I have not had housing or stable housing for quite some time, all the way to I am facing eviction or couch surfing. We consider everything in between as well as possible homelessness. Eligibility criteria number 2. We know in the state of Ohio, access to inpatient psychiatric hospitals can be very difficult. There's wait lists. Private psychiatric hospitals will turn our folks away, saying that their level of care is too high for them, etc. So we have some rural and Appalachian counties that rely on crisis stabilization units a lot. So we opened this up to where an individual can have 2 or more crisis stabilization unit stays, again within that past 12 months, and again touched by 1 or more of the following systems. Number 3, we did a blend of the 2. Sometimes we get counties that are lucky and can get somebody in for 1 psychiatric hospitalization in that year and then a CSU stay. So we can do those, again, within the past 12 months and then touched by 1 or more of the following systems. 4, Senate Bill 2, a few years ago, Outpatient Competency Restoration Program for our nonviolent misdemeanor offenders. So for this one, we understood that, and you all know Dr. Gordish and all of that, right? So we worked together to open this up to those folks who are currently in an outpatient competency restoration program, but have a significant mental illness and need those supports. What we have found is that a lot of courts are more willing to agree to have somebody go through outpatient competency restoration if they are involved in access to wellness. So we've got a sweet spot for those people, and then if they need further supports after, they're set. And then number 5, this is one of our big ones. Those who are currently incarcerated in jail and in need of supports upon release. We are waiving those hospitalizations, CSU stays, and other system involvement with the understanding those folks have been diagnosed with a mental illness and are already involved in our criminal justice system. For this one, this required a new level of thinking for our county boards across the state. There's a lot of county boards, as you've seen in presentations today, that are already having mental health embedded in their jails, but there's still a lot that need the help to do so and do not have those good collaborative relationships with their jails. This kind of forced it. So what we're seeing now is that our jails and jail staff are now communicating with our county ADAM-HS boards or the providers who are running this program on behalf of the county board and getting people linked with services. My rule is that I don't need somebody to start getting the money when they're incarcerated. I just want to see them referred to the program, period. Because we know our folks can cycle in and out of our jails within 24 hours. Sometimes you've got courts or judges saying, okay, 5 a.m., you're released. And so if we can start that referral process within a few hours after they've been incarcerated, that counts. And if they're found eligible, even upon release, then they've got a contact. We've got people wrapped around them already to help that recidivism. Okay, so recovery supports. Not only is this an effort to collaborate on the county level and have counties collaborate with one another, because we know our folks sometimes can be transient and move from county to county to county. So this is to provide recovery supports. Recovery supports are a type of financial assistance intended to help individuals initiate and sustain their recovery. I should note, an individual does not need to be linked to a behavioral health provider to participate in this program. If they have a significant mental illness and they meet one of those criteria, let's get them on. Let's get them on board. What we've also seen is that people will start to participate in their recovery and in their behavioral health treatment if they have housing, if they have food, if they have clothing. Maintaining your mental health is a full-time job, let alone when you add these other barriers to it. So ADAM-HS boards and the providers that they work with identify recovery supports based on clinical judgment and client need. Is the recovery support directly related to the individual's mental health and their recovery in the community? This means, like I said, housing, transportation. I'm going to show you a big list of recovery supports. It does not mean $7 Starbucks drinks or $300 pair of tennis shoes, okay? We want to make sure people have those things and have supports within the community, but within reason. So a couple examples here. Transportation. Transportation can include ride sharing, especially in our metropolitan areas. This also helps in our rural areas sometimes too, those that do have ride sharing but don't have public transportation available. Bus passes, gas cards, things like that. Housing, we're going to break that out here in a minute. And emergency basic needs. That is clothing, food, hygiene stuff. Or like I just got a request here when I was sitting here, there's an individual in Montgomery County has a lice infestation in his apartment and his landlord is threatening to evict him if they don't fix it. So yes, that $165 to take care of that, absolutely approved. Let's keep him in housing. This is a non-exhaustive list chart of recovery supports. I will tell you, our boards and their providers have been incredibly creative. They actually built this. So we started out real small with some ideas around recovery supports, and we gave them a lot of flexibility to figure out how this program can serve their folks. There's a couple things I want to note on here. You're going to notice in the first square up there that I mentioned landlord incentives and damages. I want to be very clear. Our programs at Ohio Moss work like puzzle pieces. So where one has gaps and is lacking, another one would come in and fill it. So in terms of what my coworker, my colleague, I don't know where she went, there she is, hi, was mentioning earlier, I want to be clear that this is not to replace the landlord incentive program or the landlord mitigation program. What this does is it catches the folks that don't fit within the landlord incentive or the landlord mitigation program, because a lot of our folks sometimes don't have criminal justice interaction. They may be with DD, they may be aging, veterans, or homelessness, and have that SPMI. So in terms of damages, what we see is that our boards, if the damage is caused by the individual with the SPMI while they're living there, we can cover those within reason. We will not cover damages that were caused by the tenant before or the tenant that comes after. So if the landlord goes, oh, well, that was caused after they moved out, no, you have to do it while they're in your housing unit, and then we will approve it. Same thing with landlord incentives is that the average is about $1,200. We do have gaps in Ohio that do not have great housing for our folks, which I'm again preaching to the choir here. But private landlords is who we would give that to, and to build those relationships. You'll see everything from guardianship fees, prepaid phone and minutes, because we know that a lot of that's how we communicate these days, and telehealth and all of that is a very real thing for our folks. Fees to obtain identification, such as birth certificates, social security cards. We've done license reinstatement fees as well. Assessments, specialized services. For that one, when our folks are in a hospital, psychiatric hospital, they are not, their Medicaid will be put on hold for a bit, and outside assessments are also put on hold. What we've used this for is, so we've had a couple folks that have been in one of our regional inpatient psych hospitals, and maybe they needed some DBT or EMDR, and those specialized services could be provided to them while in the hospital under this, and Access to Wellness will pay for that. Case management, those types of things, we're not supplanting, we're doing it until they can get the services paid for by another funding source. So if they're waiting on their Medicaid, if they're waiting on their Social Security to kick in, if they're waiting for all those applications, this can fill in the gaps and be a stopgap until those other payer sources can come into action. This is a payer of last resort. We want those local, federal, state dollars to be used because these programs exist, right? So we want a landlord incentive program, the formal one. We want the landlord mitigation program to be utilized first before relying on any other program. All right. Oh, and sustainability. I'm a big fan of sustainability. So when I was hired to run this program, this came shortly after. We will fund positions at the provider level to run this program. I'm not going to lie to you. This program has a heavy lift when it comes to the administrative burden on providers. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of moving money around, there's a lot of paying for recovery supports. And for our metropolitan cities, that can become really burdensome when you've got caseloads of 250 to 300 people every 6 months that you're serving with this program. And then we will also offer a 10% indirect to those providers to cover other administrative costs, bookkeeping, the finance end of things. Whereas the one is to run the program, get it out there, get those applications, serve the folks. The other is the back end stuff that it requires. Any questions about those so far? Yeah.
I just have a question about the eligibility, going back to the DD diagnosis. Do they have to be linked to the county board, or could they have any intellectual disability?
They need to be linked to a county board.
Okay.
We need that validity piece to it to make sure that it's, yeah.
Even if we have like a diagnosis that they have an intellectual disability from like a court clinic or something?
Yeah,
but they can't be.
Yeah,
okay.
we need that link with the DD board. Reason why is because when we have that service and it comes in, it's incredible what they can do. They're able to serve that person more, for long term than if we don't.
And then my other question is, for the hospitalization stays, would a restoration to competency stay ever qualify as one of those?
It can, absolutely, but it cannot qualify if they just had one long-term stay in a regional psych hospital. We would use Access to Success for that, because that's what that's meant for.
Even if they come back to jail?
If they come back to jail and then they go back out to another psychiatric inpatient hospitalization, great, there's your two. But we cannot do if they have one hospitalization long-term in a psychiatric facility, that would not count. If they're already in jail, yes, we can do that.
Okay.
That would count towards the jail qualification, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So AOT is not a criminal justice program, so does that mean that you would take people in the civil commitment side, because that's where that is?
Typically, AOT we see running through our court systems anyway, so it's
Probate
involving,
court, though,
correct,
not, yeah.
and we will, yeah. So as long as they're in an AOT court, some counties like Hamilton don't call it AOT, but it's the same kind of program, just has a different name, then
So
yes.
they could just be in a court program, not specifically criminal justice?
It would need to be criminal justice related.
Okay.
Yeah. I know, that is a
AOT is
caveat.
not a criminal justice
Let me tell you,
related program.
that is not a caveat that I made.
Okay.
That existed before I came on board and was an agreement that was made with prior leadership and the folks that run AOT. Okay. So I'm going to give you some data from fiscal year 24. I gather data every 6 months and then a year-end report. So we have a lot of data. So fiscal year '24, we served 1,734 folks, and this gives you a breakout. Now, if you're good at math, which I am not, but you might add all of those and go, Liz, that is not 1,734. It's because people can identify with multiple systems at one time. So we don't count just one time, we count them all. And then you'll see here, obviously, criminal justice involvement, jail incarceration, and homelessness are our top three. So fiscal year '24, after receiving help from an Access to Wellness program, 81% did not experience another hospitalization, 90% did not experience another incarceration, and 96% did not experience another CSU stay. So we know that this is effective, right? We know it's keeping people out of our institutions. Some of the current next level of data, and I'm not sure how we're going to do it yet, but it's to find out what money we're saving with this program. So in terms of those regional psych hospitalizations or private psych hospitalizations, what kind of money are we saving as a state by implementing this? Again, not a statistician, so we'll let them fix it. For 3 years in a row, housing is our #1 need and recovery support that is given. Emergency basic need items come second and transportation in third. Housing is by far the highest that we spend money on. Here is our housing breakdown of what is provided. We will assist with rent and security deposits for permanent housing. That is our highest use. Transitional and time limit housing, we use that for hotels. It is not ideal, but there is no housing for that step down process and that intermediary for our folks. It's either you're institutionalized and you're in the community and there's nothing in between. So we have very few resources, and we use that for hotels to keep people housed and off the streets. Permanent supportive housing, this is your group homes and things like that, and again, recovery housing, same kind of vibe. 6-month report, I'm going to take you to previous. So right now, this is data from July 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2024. So far, in the first 6 months of 2025, we've served 1,501 people. That is already exceeding only 200 some less than what we served in the entire year of fiscal year 24. Our data is quite similar, with 82% not experiencing another hospitalization, 90 not experiencing another incarceration, and 96 not experiencing another CSU stay. And again, housing, emergency basic needs, and transportation, in that order, are our highest recovery supports. So how to make a referral? This is run by the county boards and their providers, just depending on how they set it up. In our larger metropolitan counties, typically the board is the fiscal agent, but they've brought on someone like Southeast or a behavioral health provider to do all of the administration of it. So if you have someone or know of someone that would fit this criteria, we're going to contact the county board, let them know, and they will take it from there. Each one has their own unique application process that they have developed. Some are online. Cuyahoga has theirs online, and anybody can do it. The accessibility is pretty great. Others, you have to contact the board. There's a paper application, and so forth. This link, which you all will have, leads to a map on the Access to Wellness website that shows you every single county that's participating. You can click on it, and it gives you the contact information for that program in that area. And then I really wanted to end on a positive note. But these are success stories. Every 6 months in the survey reports, I gather success stories from our county boards and their providers. And they tell me how this program has impacted folks. I'm not going to read it all to you. I hope that the folks online can also read it. But just in summary, we had a 19-year-old gentleman who was in jail since summer of 2024, and he was also linked with developmental disabilities. We use these funds to assist him with weather-appropriate clothing and transitional housing. He is now successfully connected to mental health services, DD services, and is scheduled to move into a family care home. The second one, this adult lady had a lot of suicide attempts. She has command hallucinations, attempt to jump off a bridge into the Ohio River. A lot of incarceration, felony mental health docket involvement. So we use these funds, well, Hamilton County did, I didn't. But Hamilton County used these funds for moonlighting services. Hamilton County is doing something pretty unique here, and I'm going to call them out. So they are using these funds to pay for peer services or CPST services that are extra that may not be paid for by other systems or Medicaid. So and they do a lot of crisis intervention with those types of services to keep people stable in the community. It's lessened the calls to 911 and police involvement. So she has successfully graduated from her mental court docket, charges were dismissed, and she's not had any hospitalizations or further incarcerations in the past 6 months. Here's one from Montgomery County. They have worked really hard to expand this into their jails, and for those, like I said earlier, that kind of forced everybody to really get in the jails, move into there, and have that collaboration, that communication with folks. So 150 individuals were assessed for or linked to mental health services during their incarceration within that 6-month period, and less than 1/3 of them had a subsequent incarceration or hospitalization. This is one that I've been linked with, I've been working on. It's an ongoing one. I'm not even going to say which county it's out of because there's a lot of people wrapped around it. This young man has a very long history of schizophrenia, bipolar type, in and out of psychiatric institutions, involvement with criminal justice system. He threatened to kill an officer one evening, a crisis team member, his brother, and a female tenant in an apartment building. To give you an idea, she was delivering a package to him that was in the mail area. He opened the door and stabbed the box with a knife, with a very big, large kitchen knife. Had she not had the box, it would have been her. So, access to wellness funds were used to place a security deposit and first month's rent onto an apartment. He was in the hospital, so that way he could get out and immediately have housing. We paid for the rest of his lease at his current apartment to release him from it. Hygiene items, transportation. He's been in the community. However, I cannot say he's not had further issues. This young man is triggered by his mom. Mom tends to interfere in his life in ways that are inappropriate, and he has some cycling. So we've moved him out of that previous county and into another county with access to wellness services, and so they're wrapping around services that way. This is a quote from a recipient of program funding. This individual is able to move into their own apartment for the first time in over 3 years after incarceration, hospitalizations, and CSU stays. And so far, they've been stable on their own and enjoying their life in their community. This is the link, so again, you'll have this, to the Access to Wellness website. If anyone has questions, you can go there and find all the information you need, but there's also a contact me button, and that leads directly to me. And so I will answer their questions, I'll answer your questions, all of my contact information's here. Email me, and we can get somebody linked if we need to. Any questions? Yeah, I saw your hand.
I know that most the counties are responsible for allocating the funds. Do you have any idea of how quickly they are giving those funds? Especially, I was looking at like the recovery support funding, like how fast that's happening?
Yep. Every month I process allocation disbursements with my fiscal department. So at the very most, it's like a week wait. Oh, okay. But let me be clear, that's when the dollars land into the board. They have this money all the time. Okay. So they have it coming and filtering in at all times. I will tell you that some cases are immediate. So this money is in their bank account, they can use it as they see fit. Gotcha. Okay. If they run out, they got to tell me, I'll give them more.
Okay.
If someone has a period of time at a divergence center, would that qualify as the same as
it does not? Yeah, it does not. Yeah. Neither does CBCF. We've had that question a lot. If CBCFs would count, they do not. Yeah.
For the success and outcome statistics, what was the length of time for the follow-up? Was that within the 3 months or 6 months?
6 months.
6 months.
So we do 6 months, and then there's a year-end report that you saw. So let me go back and clarify that for you really quick. So for this fiscal year 25, that's from July 1st through December 31st. So 6-month period. If you go back to fiscal year 24, that was the entire year. Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other
I have a question. I don't know if you can hear me because my chat wasn't working.
We got you.
What was the name of that other access to, was it Access to Justice program?
Success.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That is run by Caitlin Behaworth at Ohio Moss. Yeah, and that program is for individuals coming out. It's very similar to Access to Wellness. And they provide supports, recovery supports to folks who are coming out of our regional psychiatric hospitals who may not have more than one hospitalization. Why am I staring at the ceiling when I'm talking? I was like, yes, God, okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
And then there's also access to recovery, correct?
I don't know, access to recovery.
I think that's more or SUD focused.
I have no idea. We have, yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, I don't know that one.
Okay.
We have
thank
SOAR.
you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Now it's your turn.
And it escaped me, so I will let you know if it comes back.
Okay.
Sorry.
You're okay. 3 a.m. You're going to think of it and email me, right? Yeah.
I will email you.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. So Megan and I are here to talk about a program that's really important to us up in Cuyahoga County. We're going to go to the next one?
Yeah.
The stark reality of Cleveland is our current population is 1.3 million, and this is actually all of Cuyahoga County. As of January 2024, our homeless population had increased by 3%. And on any given day, there's about 5,000 individuals experiencing homelessness. Our county jail on any given day has approximately 1,600 people cycling in and out. And prior to 2020, homelessness was not even tracked in our county jail. The HUD definition of chronic homelessness is 365 days straight of homelessness or 4 episodes in 3 years, totaling 365 days. Our highest utilizers of emergency rooms, jails, and shelters are the chronically homeless, and they're also the most expensive throughout our county. I know Hazel touched base about this some too, but the reality of Cuyahoga County housing market is as of 2024, the rent per household is $1,372, which is an 8% increase from the previous year. And this data highlights a significant rise in rental costs. In Cleveland, there are only 38 affordable units available for every 100 households. And for low-income renters, this makes it really hard to not only sustain, but to obtain.
Hi, everyone. As Elaine said, my name is Megan Patton. I'm the Specialty Court Administrator at Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court. I'm lucky enough to oversee our 12 different specialty courts. And back in 2017, when I was the mental health coordinator, I was lucky enough to work with our mental health judges and Justice Stratton and bring stepping up to our county. So in 2017, we completed our first SIM workshop. So if you've experienced that, I think it's one of the days that lives in my brain a lot, because it was for the first time in a long time in our county, we had individuals and leadership from every aspect in the same room and talking. And as we went through those 2 days of mapping, one of the loud things that were coming out on a constant basis was the discussion around housing. And I firmly remember, I could picture in the room the judges on one side and housing people on the other side, and housing, or the judges saying, we have no housing, we don't know where to put people, we're just putting them at the shelter, and the housing people going, we have housing and programs. And although we had a great relationship with our behavioral health community in our county, we probably didn't have a strong enough relationship with our housing partners. And really one of the great takeaways from that experience was learning from each other. And it obviously was one of the biggest things that everyone said at the end of those 2 days that we need to do a better job on. So following those 2 days, we created a committee where leadership from all across came, and they met on a monthly basis. And really those first few months was just education. The one thing I always give an example of is the court system thought we were doing something really good when we couldn't find housing or couldn't get someone into a group home. We would at least transport them to 2100, our men's shelter, and at least leave them at the front door so they walk right in. We didn't know as a court system that they had to then walk 4 blocks the other way back then to register at coordinated intake. So it was that simple thing that we thought we were doing the right thing, and we were probably making people confused and upset because we weren't dropping them off at the right location, nor probably doing as warm of a handoff as we should have been. So there were things like that that came out. Through Stepping Up, we also received a Housing Technical Assistance Grant, which brought in Council of State Governments that helped us to look at our data in partnership with OHFA, the county jail, HMIS, and kind of figure out what our population in the jail looked like as well, which also helped us make choices in the future. And really what came out of that is learning and being educated on what was happening across the state, returning home. Ohio was a program that we were vaguely aware of, but we didn't really understand what it meant. But because of the committee work, we began to look at the different programs across the state, hear the needs from our judges of what was going on within our mental health court, and start to leverage some of that knowledge and education. We presented a lot. Our partners in our county, our behavioral health and our housing partners did a lot of education for all of us, and presented the problem and some solutions to our mental health court judges and our administrative teams as well. We then really wanted to focus on providing permanent supportive housing to the individuals that were cycling within our mental health court. From there, we identified our partners, which were Frontline, Eden, and then the County Office of Homeless Services also provided us with their expertise and technical assistance as well. So our program that we created was really pivoted off of the state program, although we did make a few different changes because of our target population and the needs that we had in our county. But our goal was to identify individuals on pretrial and probation in our mental health court. We started with 15 participants and then expanded to 20 over the years. Working with Eden to identify independent scattered sites, and then wraparound services with Frontline, who serves our most chronic homelessness partner individuals in the community. So we contracted with both of those agencies to create team members that were dedicated to this project. So a care coordinator, a case manager, a peer support specialist, and then assistance from a psychiatrist, and then counseling too. And then from Eden, we had a stability specialist, eligibility specialist, and then a community housing agent as well. Anything you want to add?
The great thing about the stability specialist is they work with the participant before they go into housing to help locate a unit and find a unit in the community that works for them and isn't necessarily in an area that's not going to be beneficial for them, but also has that relationship with the landlord. So if things take a turn the first couple months while they're in housing, they're able to step in and really mediate that and kind of sustain the housing.
Thank you. So how we identified individuals is we created a prioritization tool to identify that cycling going on within the county jail, the homeless system, and then any hospitalization utilization, what we saw with some of our individuals in our mental health court is they were staying in jail, as we know nationally, a little bit longer in pretrial. So when we looked back at their year before coming into the program, we saw that they didn't have cycling episodes in and out of jail because we're obviously a felony-based court. And because of that, we had to readjust what we thought cycling was going to look like to what it actually looked like, because we didn't want to leave people out of the program who were actually in jail for a long period of time because of that pre-trial. And then obviously we were looking at 2 or more hospitalizations, and then homelessness too. The one thing we didn't want to use is just the HUD definition, because we knew our folks were cycling in and out. They were couch surfing. They were staying in jail maybe longer. They were on the streets because either they were kicked out of the shelters, so there wasn't a record of them there. So we wanted to be really flexible about the days either on the streets or at a shelter too. The other 2 things that the judges asked us to really think about is not to exclude sex offenders, violent offenders, or those with arson. So it was really important that they saw it on their dockets every day that those individuals were coming in and out because they had nowhere to go. So they really asked us to make sure that we included them in, and we have done so. The referral process, Katie's going to talk us through.
So with the referral process, like Megan said, we work closely with Frontline Service, which they're our mental health agency downtown that does primarily focus on our homeless population throughout our county. So they receive the referral from the probation officer, and they are identifying and scoring off the previous slide. From there, Frontline completes the assessment, and they complete the housing application that then comes over to Eden. Eden processes the housing application, and then we meet with Frontline, sit down, we complete everything, go over everything housing and Eden related. From there, that's when the stability specialist comes into play, and then they work closely with the participant to locate a unit within the community. After that, once they identify something and it passes inspection, then they can go ahead and sign their lease.
So program outcomes so far, when we looked at our first 15 participants, these were the days that they were in the county jail prior to beginning the program. And then once they entered the program, which was any time between 2020 and the end of 2023, we see a sharp decrease in the amount of times they were coming in and out of the county jail. We launched the program, I think, 1 week before the world turned off. So that first 6 months to a year was definitely challenging, but we really still kind of pushed through it because we knew how important a program like this was to us. And then when we look at the data, so this is data, the first chart is the data of our first 15 participants and the amount of cycling that they experienced 12 months prior to coming into the program. So you see lots of hospitalizations, time in the county jail, and then homelessness in months. And then if you look at the chart next to it, that's over a 3-year span. So from March of 2020 all the way to April of 2023, and you then see what their cycling looked like after. We're currently reviewing all of our 2024 data right now, and that should be out soon. When we first did this presentation in-house, I think it was 2022, and it was even lower than that. And I always say we are dealing with the most complex individuals cycling through. So we know we're going to still see some of this, but the biggest takeaway is that the dramatic decrease in cycling is outstanding for these individuals. Some of them, I was a probation officer earlier in my career, and some of them I know because I had them over 15 years ago. One individual had a case in our court every single year. We send him to inpatient treatment over 15 times, in and out of prison or county jail, every residential place we could think of, every housing place we could think of, and it wasn't until he came into this program that it abruptly began, and he did a lot better as well. Since then, we really realized he needed an even higher level of care, so this great team made sure that he got to the actual level of care that he needed.
Were you able to collect data on the offenses that they were arrested for?
I do have that. I don't have a chart of it, but so in our mental health court, we accept any offenses. So I would say they're all technically probationable offenses, so typically felony 3s or lower, but there are violent individuals with violent criminal history in our program. About half of them have that. Any other questions about the data?
So, for your police contact, that's not necessarily a charge, it's what constitutes it?
Yeah, so that was really self-report based from the team and the client themselves. So we didn't go through and like pull any place, because we aren't regionalized either up in Cleveland, so to get even municipal data can be hard because we have a lot of different courts. But so that was pretty much self-report from the team and the person themselves, or any type of like crisis calls that we were aware of. In terms of hospitalization, again, that was based on the information from our team and the individual. If they spent more than 1 or 2 days in any type of ER, the case manager and peer support that are having weekly contact with them would be aware of that. Shelter stays was through HMIS data, and then new cases was through our court. Right now we're doing a full recidivism check on every individual, so that should be out in the next couple months. So what our contracts consisted of, we went over the team members, and then obviously office supplies, travel, training, and administrative fees for frontline contract. We also put in line items for utility assistant, gift cards, bus tickets, furniture and clothing needs, because obviously if we're placing someone into housing who hasn't had safe housing for a long time, that they need that. For the Eden contract, the dedicated team members, the rental assistance, security deposit for the clients, housing stability services, and then we had a small line item for the risk mitigation fund before the state began. So we were really thankful, and I think we utilized that a lot, and it's something that was really helpful to us. And then administrative fees, office supplies, travel, and training. So one of the things we always get asked is, how much does this cost? And so our contracts equate to about $500,000 to run the program. If you go back to how much it cost for those individuals to sit in a county jail, that was upwards of $400,000. That does not take into account their ER visits, the cost to the court, the cost to the EDs, the homeless shelters, or anything. So if you would actually do a full business case on these individuals, they are costing our county in different areas a whole lot more than what we're paying them to be housed in safe housing with team members that are there on a weekly basis with them.
And speaking to the cost, the rental assistance programs benefit the individual and their families. They help prevent homelessness. They decrease the rent burden. If an individual or household has income, they pay 30% of their income towards their rent. If they don't, then the rental subsidy picks up the full rent amount. It's shown that there's a decrease to the Medicaid and public health costs by an average of 12%, and it supports the health and stability overall while increasing employment and income. And not only is there an increase, and not only is there a benefit to the individual and family, but there's also a benefit to the entire community. With these rental assistance programs, it lessens law enforcement's burden, and the time they spend on the homeless leads to increase interactions with police and the criminal justice system. Housing interventions reduce these interactions, saving on incarceration and legal system expenses. It decreases healthcare expenses like we spoke about previously. The housing providers rent units to our participants through the private market. The rental assistance ensures the consistent rent payments while reducing vacant properties for private landlords, as well as the tax revenues and stable renters contribute to the local, state, and federal tax bases paid indirectly through the rent amounts going. Any questions?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I have to say this is a very well-run program because everybody was on time or early, which is often very rare. And so I hope you really come away with some very good ideas and benefits you can take back. We had about 28 or 30 online, so we had a good representation that were watching, and that hopefully Sean and Elaine will get us the slide decks from all the presentations. And we'll probably send the slide decks out to the entire AG Task Force Committee because we like all of them to get some of the benefits of the programs you've presented. And I've got a couple other committees I'm going to be tapping some of you to make presentations to on certain segments of it. So thank you so much for both of you, for your co-chairs, for the early engagement that we had with OHFA way back then when Sally Lucan and I came and talked to you. We've been a great partner all these times, and the programs that you have in Eden and Cuyahoga are just really amazing. I'm a personal huge fan of access to wellness. You can see the data on it is just amazing. I keep pushing it over and over and over. And so I hope that you will take some of the materials that are there, the AG Task Force report, if you want to see about other counties, if you're interested in stepping up, take a look and see if your county is one. If not, please let me know. I would love to sign them up. We've got a handful left to engage. We bring all these sort of resources to the county, but as they found from doing the sequential intercept map, one of the biggest benefits of these county visits is gets the counties to talk to each other. The left hand often doesn't know what the right hand is doing. The judges often aren't very connected with programs. I have judges tell me that they just have a busy docket and they can't present. And I say, hey, you take a lunch break, it's by Zoom, I'm going to put you over the lunch hour, not taking no for an answer, and then I get them on, I can't shut them up. I have this and this and this and this and this need, and all of a sudden somebody says, but I have that, or you never reached out, or you didn't even know I existed. We did one county, small county, the commissioner said for our second visit, well, we haven't really done much, come on down. At the end of the meeting, he said, I had no idea we were doing that in our own county, and he was the county commissioner. So these meetings are of great benefit. And we have, when I started with Tom Craig from the PEGS Foundation, mental health director, we had 2 people, just Tom and me. I have 9 presenters now, someone from OMAS, someone from CIT, from NAMI, you name it, we have but we really stress the co-presentations and always have the local representative of every one of those presentations talk and present, and those relationships formed after the meeting's over have been really invaluable. So it's in that case, Zoom became very helpful because I've doubled my attendance, and my 9 people probably couldn't go twice a month somewhere off in Ohio because they live all over Ohio, but they can all hop on a Zoom. So again, thank you so much. Grab somebody for lunch, build a relationship, take these programs back, spread them far and wide. And don't forget what the governor talked about. I'm putting it in the newsletter with the grant application. He's got $20 million each year now in opiate money for new programming in your jail that you can use for staff, for contracts, for paying for medication like withdrawal medication. He's had 8 jails apply. So there's a lot of money sitting there, and it's a 3-year program. So please go back to your counties and say, hey, my county, have you applied yet? And if you haven't, they need to apply. So I keep telling, all these years I've had lots of free money to give out, and you can't imagine how hard it is to give out free money sometimes. It took us forever to get the jail medication reimbursement program to all the counties. I couldn't believe it. It's like you just give them your bill and they send you a check. And it took forever to get counties to send the bill and get the check. Meanwhile, county commissioners are paying the freight, or the ADA board is paying the freight. So enough of my speech and my lecturing. I hope you all will go home and take all this information and spread it far and wide. And thank you again to Pete and Donna for taping this as always. It'll eventually be on our website, and hopefully a link on the Supreme Court or the AGTF website. And thank you to Carolyn Bevins for all the hard work she does managing this and putting it together. I think Michael left early. He leave early. And so to the team, Michael and Carrie, for their help, and mostly to the Attorney General for the fact that he approached me 6 years ago and said, I want to keep doing this, and I'm so glad he did, because we've been able to do a lot of good. So thank you. Enjoy this beautiful, but still a little bit chilly day. Take care. I'll see you.